discussion got a little delayed. And we all were wondering at the backstage. This is that critical hour of the day just before lunch, when the mind is more hungry about all the insights that we can get through the panel. And there's a stomach also which is demanding a lot of attention. So I think we're going to balance all those acts together and see how it goes from here. We have flat, I think, 30, 40 minutes to get the show done. I am Gaurav Paruthi, as you already know now. So our topic, the subject is learning analytics. Coming to the subject right away, I think data drives decisions these days. We've been hearing it since yesterday and today morning. What gets measured gets improved and gets managed as well. I think those are the insights that you can expect out of these the conversation that we're going to do right away. While that is all happening, there is a little thought from Albert Einstein that I want you to just chew on while we get the conversations going. He said, not everything that counts gets counted, and not everything gets counted counts. So it is all about asking the right questions from the data to derive the meaningful insights out of that. And this is essentially the core of what we are trying to discuss in this forum today. There are so many incredible leaders out here. I would like to start with the one closest to me, which is Bhavisha. So Bhavisha, how has the learning analytics evolved over the last few years in the role in the organizations, and how critical is that as part of the L&D strategies now?
Thank you, Gaurav, for that question. So let me just start by saying that when we talk about learning analytics, we always say, and he just mentioned, right, data is God. I think analytics is then the messenger of God. It helps us read that data and leverage it to our advantage. Now, I'll answer the second question first. Why is it important? It's important for 4 different reasons. One, it allows us to personalize the training, which is the need of the hour now, making it very targeted, very focused, very just in time. It allows us to track performance, ROI. I think through the day, that's one term that I've heard. But performance tracking from a training effectiveness standpoint, from a learner progress standpoint, from an alignment to business goals standpoint. Third, most important, wherever you are in the boardroom, cost is always an indicator. So how do you make your training more cost effective? How do you make sure that it's not like a band-aid training, you're doing training for everybody for a certain number of hours. It's about how do we make it more relevant? What is the skill gap, which is the S part of it? If there is a certain workforce that you have today, where do you need to take them? And how do you make sure that using the analytics, you're able to then drive the right and the most impactful training? And so coming to the first part of it, which is how has it evolved? Well, I think it's become far more qualitative in terms of analysis than more quantitative. I mean, we used to talk about more descriptive analysis and more predictive, but I think now it's more prescriptive. What training is required for which skill set to drive what business outcome? And I would say that's really how the whole scenario has changed, because training is changing, the skill sets required are changing, technology is moving at a super fast pace than when I started 20 years back, and the most important, the learner at the helm. We call them Gen Zs, that's the newest population that's coming our way. They're all born with a technology spoon. So how do you keep all of that together and use analytics to drive very specific training aligned to the business goals? That's a very long answer to a question, but yes.
Oh, thank you, Bhavisha. I think we got the discussion started with that. I mean, that's the core idea is data is God, and what you do with the data is part of the learning strategies per se. Continuing on this, Rasheed, what do you think is the role of the L&D analytics in aligning the initiatives to what the organizations want to achieve?
Sure, I think we are at an inflection point. I was hearing a couple of speakers saying the role of L&D will get defunct. I think we are the most powerful function at this point in time within the IT space. I think Mr. Krishnan, I was just listening to him, he covered a lot of aspects of it. In the services space today, the amount of technology that is kind of gravitating to the new style of IT, and every company today, wants to grab its pie of revenue. Having a right focus on our people and aiding them upskilled and cross-skilled is essential. And for that, analytics plays a great, important role, predominantly in 3 or 4 areas. One, in terms of tactical planning at an account level, how we are able to get that, and get the monetization done. And 2, in terms of operational level, from an RFP coming in, what needs to get done. And then at a strategic level, we'll have to analyze the next 2 years. What are the new technologies that are going to come in? How much of it we are going to leverage and make that whole access happen. But before we even go there, right, we need, from an analytics perspective, our skills taxonomy has to be completely graded. Because unless and until we don't know what skills our people have, we cannot make any changes. Like we say, garbage in, garbage out, especially in the role of analytics plays a greater part. In terms of having the skills ontology, ensuring what are the skills, because today we are dealing with a lot of young population. If we don't put them in the right area after they have acquired that skill, then that we are training them for our competition.
Gen Z, as Bhavisha also mentioned.
Yeah, and then the third is in terms of once that is done, we get the skills fungibility and get that whole thing moving, and that's how the analytics today plays a major part in terms of getting it done.
No, I think rightly pointed out. It is the data which essentially helps us understand whether it is aligned or not aligned and what do we do next. But the other part, Savita, I'll come to you on this. I think we were talking about data. It is all about analytics, happens on data and the insights, all of that. The other side of it, if we all take a look at it, data leaves a trail everywhere, whether it is an individual or an organization or outside an organization as well. And the important point that we all need to understand here when we talk about analytics, how do we balance the data privacy of the employees with what are we trying to do with the learning analytics in that domain? How do we do that? Is there a way to do that? Or is it an open kind of a thing that everybody has to figure out once it happens?
So I think, Gaurav, everyone is talking about data day in, day out, and I think we heard with our panels as well that so much of data has been put in, and whether it's L&D, whether you look at any of the field, right? You look at any industry, anywhere. We don't know how to manage that. And being honest, it's all over the place. Do we have our teams? Do we have everyone in place that they know how to manage, read the data? Is our own team enabled? Is that data, are we able to show it to the stakeholders saying, this is the gaps, this is what we need, this is what is the forecast. I think 2 years is still far. I think next 6 months or a year is something which I look at. But what is important is we are not communicating enough. What are we doing with this data, right? So it's important for us to talk to our employees, communicate. What are we doing with this data? Where are we storing it? How are we linking it? Then more on that front, if you look at next one, your stakeholders, when you're putting that picture, it's very important that you give them the right picture, right? Otherwise, if you look at L&D, they don't think that L&D has a seat. And I think NK mentioned beautiful topic, and the way he covered was, I would say excellent, that there are various stages of that. So now, whether the organization, are we compliant enough? Are we doing the regular audits? Are we following the regulations? And I know we all were talking about it. It's just not the regulations. It's far beyond. And your China example was the very good one with the bot recently, which happened. So I think for all of us, I think the readiness of the organization, I think we all mentioned, and one hand raised, and when NK asked the question, I think overall, as an organization, we might be in the beginner or intermediate stage. We are not even there, right? I would be honest, and we all are thinking about it, but how does that one thing stitch it all? I think it's far away to go. I'm being very honest with that.
Absolutely. As I think coming back to what NK also mentioned, I think the lens also matters a lot. We take a look at the analytics or the data points from a very learning-centric insight or lens. Whereas a person who is learning through an online portal of the organization, maybe late night, every night, what is he bringing to the organization next day? Is that the loop that is getting covered? Where are we on that? Essentially, I don't know, we are looking at that point in a complete circle. So I think those are kind of, and vice versa. If a person is spending every day 1 hour in the office on learning, what is that impact on the productivity and what do we need to do about that? Is that something to think about? And there can maybe different connotations around that. Dr. Sujatha, I know you have been patiently waiting for this. I think, so it is what to do with the data that comes in a little later. First is how do we gather data in the rightful manner, the righteous manner? Is there any innovation happening around the world that helps us understand this is a new way of gathering data to get the new style of learning analytics done? Is there something of that that can share your insights with the group here?
Absolutely. Innovation seems to be the most happening word. And we're also seeing a whole lot of things evolving in the last couple of years. And I'm going to share through some examples. What we started off, and I'm sharing it from my perspective. A couple of years ago, and I'm talking a pre-COVID, which is just before the COVID happened, we were running some kind of an engagement for one of the pharmaceutical clients in Basel, and I was there for that. And what we were looking at was this huge wishing wall, which was capturing the kind of aspirations the learners had, right? And what I'm talking about is, it's a way, you write it out there. You emote when you write out a lot of things there, right? So from there, we kind of transitioned, and we collected so much of information about how learners were learning, what kind of changes, what did they like, what do they wish for, and all of it. But over a period of time, and when this COVID happened, it had to change, right? And when they shifted gears, everything had to be done in a very innovative way. So whether it is a Miro board, whether it is Connect, whether it is capturing your feedback through surveys, all of those things were brought in place. But I'm again going to go back to something that was shared earlier. How, through what lenses are you looking at that data? Right? Because the data sanctity is very important. You can gather loads of data, you can analyze the data, you can draw inferences, but what is most important is how do you want to see it? If you're talking about somebody in the boardroom, they would want to look at how is it going to be meaningful to drive profitability in the organization, while probably somebody in the HR would look at how is it going to be meaningful for people, right? So that they find it relevant. And I think the way in which data is being analyzed, the way in which it's being captured, there are different ways. Whether it is in your learning experience platforms, you can collect data, you can look at how people are using it, which part of the day are they using it, so that you can kind of, start some kind of an engagement within the organization. All of that is there available in the data. But I feel that at some point, we should not miss out the empathy part of it. And if we only rely on data, right, and the sanctity of the data is important. We are talking about numbers, and sometimes it could be lies. And so it's important for us to also have a combination. While innovation is important and technology has taken us to a totally different level, how can we also bring in the human aspect to to drive inferences from the data that we observe?
I think rightly said. I think it is innovating the whole process, by at the same time being responsible of how are we going about the matters from there on. I think very rightly said.
The ethics of data.
And the whole circle once again.
Yeah.
You get the data, you apply the right lens, you get a meaningful information. Then what happens at the end of the whole circle to the organization, coming back to the WWW model? Where is the ROI? Tell me the return on investment. And that is exactly what I'll come to Bhavisha on for. Essentially, learning analytics leads onto ROI. How, when, where? And is there anything that can be taken home for somebody who has just begun the journey on the ROI, forget about the impact and the other part of it?
So I think ROI, there's always a song. Every time somebody says ROI, there's a song which in Bollywood which says, tu paisa paisa kehti hai, paise se kyun darti hai. There is this whole thing of money, where's the money, how am I getting the money? Now ROI is what? Return on investment. What does it mean? It basically is, what is your gain of training versus your cost of training? Now, I think the first and most important point again, and because we are on the whole learning analytics piece, is how are we designing training programs that are aligned to the business goals? I think one of the biggest fallouts that we've seen is when there is a learning strategy that moves or works in a siloed manner versus what the business goals really are. Now, when you have a training that's aligned to a business outcome, then the question is, okay, so what do you mean by ROI? What is going to be that return? The return is, how are the people who are getting trained delivering better, they are more skilled, and they are as per the requirement of whatever the business needs. Now, there are learner engagement metrics that we all, of course, track, and we've been tracking all these years, and so from your completion rates to your knowledge retention rates, to your assessment scores and so on and so forth. But the more important ones today, and which is why, I keep saying that every training, while it has to be aligned to business, but there has to be performance tracking metrics, which will tell you whether your training was good enough or not. Now, this could be improvement in your productivity, it could be improvement in the customer satisfaction scores, retention scores, sales conversions, it could be reduction in any of the defect rates. However, there has to be a business goal or a KPI attached. If the KPI is improved basis the training, that data comes back to you and the analysis is that was a training well done, because then whatever training you funded, it automatically paid for itself through the business outcomes that were positive. However, should there be, there were no impressive or significant training outcomes that came out, then that is again an analytics that comes back to training or learning to say that, okay, this training needs to be done differently. Today, there is no one size fits all. It's very important to have very customized, personalized, content that is targeted to, business needs, to the skills that we need for them to perform. And if I know what skill I need, then I need to know what business KPI am I going to be impacting, and any performance improvement in that. Now, you could look at it over 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. Now, that's something that is very specific to the organization, to the account, to the function. But I think looking at all of those cuts is how we can define really what the return on investment, or paisa uska vasool hua ki nahi hua us training ka.
Yeah, I think again, very well said, Bhavishi. It is about the return that we get out of the whole intervention, not just one part of it, in a manner of speaking. And alignment with the right people at the right point in the whole journey has its own significance. And this is what I would like to now ask Rasheed. The ROI will happen once the process gets followed in a proper fashion. One of the most important part of this process is to align the right stakeholders in the journey. Do you have anything on that, maybe some incident or some situation, or how do we get the right alignment done with the stakeholders so there are minimal challenges later?
Yeah, if you look at all the business heads, if you go to CXOs, if I ask a CHRO to sign a check for a learning initiative that's going to be done, I need to have the right plan in terms of how much of dollars that I monetize. What will be the billing cycle. It's not just for a lateral level employee alone. It's for freshers too. So what specific interventional programs that we bring into. I can quote an example where, when the COVID hit us, right, once in a century pandemic, there was sudden surge in terms of, the unified communication and collaboration tools. So we had to really put that, as to how we can get those training modules in place and what can be done through remote. And then we figured out a few vendors. But it was an uncertain environment as well, and people were like, what do we do if we don't get those deals? Right. So we had to plan and ensure that these people who have the base skills can be trained on, say, a 2-week kind of a module and get them up and running, and then they will be monetized in days 40 or so, that really resonated. Then the stakeholders also track this X dollars that I've invested, what is the ROI that I get. Once we kind of have those expectations done, I think we will be able to be in a good shape. Also, with this lure comes a lot of additional pressures as well to kind of get maximization of ROI. Here, I think I would definitely take Dr. Sujatha's point. We have to measure both. We have to take both the objectives as well as the subjective element, and empathy plays a big important aspect. We cannot push people and get them skilled at scale in pressured environments and then just look at dollars alone. We have to look at well-being. We have to ensure that what's the balance out and other softer elements of it. I think if we are able to do that and demonstrate with the right metrics, like what Bhavisha was mentioning, both in the learners' standpoint as well. What is it in for the learners? Have they moved from a L1 to L2, L2 to L3, L3 to L4? I think that is the career path. The dollars for the organization and the people are happy. I think we've got a bingo.
Perfect. I think those are some of the process points that need to be followed. If you miss out on any of those, I think the whole thing comes back right to the square one, isn't it? So, perfect. I think, having a discussion on learning analytics and missing out on technology, nobody's going to spare us, isn't it? So, Dr. Sujatha, we come to you on this. How do you think AI or machine learning or any other predictive analytics tool or something is changing the whole landscape of learning analytics, if it is doing anything of that sort, in your opinion?
Yeah, it is. I spoke about data earlier, but the power of data is also enormous, right? So the way in which we can use data to drive inferences for the organization, for different fraternities that we're talking about, for the organization, when we're talking about, what is it that we're going to be showcasing to the client, when we're having these conversations with the end user, who is our clients or the end users of the clients, right? So it really helps us to understand what are some of the things that are going to be most meaningful for them. And I think we'll have to start again with the right approach, which is the problem exploration. When we get into this entire space, it's important for us to understand what is it that we are trying to gather in terms of details. Typically what would happen, and because I also feel that there is a pressure from the organization, from the HR to push into action mode, to get into action mode. And so we might sometimes miss out on that, identifying the real problem, and we might jump into the solutions part of it, right? And if we jump into the solutions, we continue to have fantastic analytics that can be depicted in beautiful ways, visual depictions. The sky is the limit today, and thanks to AI, the way in which you can cull out data and present it is very different. But I think it's very important for us to look at what is it that we want to project, and it could also end up sometimes in giving the wrong kind of information and taking wrong kind of decisions from the organization. I'll give you an example. Again, we're talking so much about ROI, and I'm going to get back to that. So are we looking at, if you're evaluating a learning experience platform, are we looking at how much time learners have spent on the platform? Or are we looking at what have they done at the end of the journey? One of my clients actually came back to us and said, I don't care how much time they spend on the platform. For me, there's going to be a hackathon, right? There's an energy client based in Europe. We have a hackathon. The business cases will come in from the different portfolios from the organization. They just got to crack it. Because once they crack it, they're going to get into, they were looking at setting up a center of excellence for automation, and they will get into that. I don't care how they're going to study. I don't want to look at the patterns. So look at how organizations may not look at a level 1, forget about level 1, level 2, level 3, and then get on to level 4. Some organizations are probably at a higher maturity level, and they want to start looking at level 4, right from the start. And so our analytics will also have to cull out that kind of data. It's not basic data. It's about what kind of support do you need from your ecosystem to be able to apply it? Don't you have the support? What more do you want? And the other one is in terms of what is the organization, and connecting it to the strategy. What is the organization looking to drive, right? What's the strategy of the organization to drive, let's say, AI in this case, right? So why are you driving AI? Because sometimes when we go back to a lot of clients, they're very excited about this upskilling on Gen AI and all of that. So the tough question is, so what? But why? Right? These are tough questions. They might have this big charter, but they don't know why they're doing what they're doing. And it's important for us to ask those questions because that will make them think at a very strategic level and not just look at things, the analytics that is about completion and progress and all of that. It's about what happens when the rubber hits the road, right? And that's something that as learning and development or people in the HR space, that's something that we need to peg at because that's what's going to probably help us with those boardroom discussions because that's going to be meaningful for everyone.
And that's where the challenge lies. I mean, there's not a hunky-dory story, not a very easy path to take as everybody is saying. It is just about talking and then making those things happen when we go back to the organizations. Essentially, I heard somebody saying, not here, somewhere else. The learning analytics, the romance had started several years back. The marriage still hasn't happened, So it is about knowing it. Now it is about implementing it in totality, which going to take some time, I'm sure. And talking on this, Savita, I know there are more good stories on learning analytics as a theory, but not in practice. And what is stopping that to happen is the challenges which are happening around all of us, isn't it? Can you help understand, or the group here, the challenges that are bound to come our way? And some of those do not have the solution also. We're going to find it together as a fraternity. What can those be?
So I think we all are talking about the data privacy one. I think that's going to be the first one, which I feel, and I'm sure most of us would know. What we have seen is why many of the countries or they are coming up with the various rules and regulations to implement. So I think that part, the consent of whether it's an employee, organization, stakeholder, that will be the one which I see. Integration of our own systems. One hand does not talk to the other one. If you look at L&D part of it, as NK also mentioned, we are in one silo, right, working. Are you involved in that strategy, and how are you going to go into from the talent to the people to the centric part of it, or the business strategic partner? It's a long way journey. We are still at that stage or the recent stage where we are still thinking, and many organizations are still not ready to invest. So integrating, unless until it's integrated across, it's not going to help. You can do all. It might
happen in pieces, but not.
Yeah, absolutely. And being honest, we all have evolved. I'm not saying that we have not evolved from L&D. If you talk about our learning journey of that 40 hours mandate to the classroom training, everyone come together in the same
smiley
room.
Feedback form, we evolved.
So it's like getting everyone. No, it's no longer, right? And when we are talking about, okay, what is the business outcome, there has been. But I think the third one is your stakeholder matters, right? They have to see the bigger picture. And most of the organizations have started. They started looking at where the skill gaps coming through, how we're going to fix it, how we're looking at our future part of it. But I think the challenge is still that mindset, that adaptability part of it. And are we open, or are we ready to invest, keeping that profit, which we all as an organizations, whichever organization we are working at, but we always look at that profit, that how much of the investment is happening and how much really will be the outcome. So that ROI understanding, it's still, I think it'll get there. Definitely. AI will help us, but I think we're still a long way.
And I hope you're talking about the profit as in dictionary, not in the mnemonic.
No, I will take his definition and as well what we stand for. Yeah. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Savita, once again. Yeah, sure, sure,
I
Rasheed,
just
please.
wanted to, see, there are two elements, right, to it. Challenges is in terms of, responsible AI. How do we deal with that? I think that is going to be the biggest challenge. What you mentioned, while we were having on the Chinese bots story, there could be many other. You could definitely. I used to lead RPA 10 years back. In fact, we had this horses for courses. Phil Fritz, used to do that. So we had a guy in RP itself when he was at writing, he kind of changed the bot, and that caused havoc. So you have to, that is the biggest, big hitter in terms of how we manage it. The power of compute is getting added. We are relishing it. People feel that AI becoming central to the business is essential, but how much of it of social good and other challenges going to come in? That's one. Two, from a people standpoint, if we don't embrace this change, India dominated the services business, right? We started off in the late 80s, and then after that there was no one else. This industry 4.0, I think if we are at a very challenging situation, we have to get our people skilled. If we don't get them skilled, and that's where L&D function plays a very critical role, we'll lose the bus. The opportunity is huge.
100%. Very well said, Rasheed, once again. All right, so we have a little over 8.5 minutes to go. Maybe a quick piece of advice by all the panelists here for organizations. One piece of advice, how do they get into learning analytics if they're going into that journey? And then we can take a couple of questions, wind up the session then. You can start from anywhere.
And I think for the group that's here, I would say broadly, so learning analytics, I think most of us get it. We are using it in some shape or form. I think the biggest fallout that I've always seen is when there is a learning strategy where the data analytics is created in silos and not in alignment with the business strategy. If the two don't go hand in hand, there's absolutely no point of having any data and any analytics, because then we are working in different directions and not together. So that's something that I've observed in a lot of organizations over the years, and I feel that yes, there is data, yes, there is a lot of data, there is, today you have a lot of AI, ML-based, data analytics that comes out to you, but how you leverage keeping in mind why are we doing it and to attain what objective. I think that alignment with business has to be very crystal clear to run anything or any strategy for a given year. So I think that's my 2 cents on this one.
I think strategic alignment, clean data, I think those two elements will mean that we will progress very well, and we will get a place in the boardroom. I've seen that L&D today gets a place in the boardroom. It's completely isolated from the HR functions earlier. Anything we get consulted in terms of where the investment dollars have to happen, where beginning of the fiscal year.
So I would just add that I think we have overwhelmed with the data which we have. So it's very important for us to first define the objectives, define the metrics which we're looking at, and make sure that your audit and the compliance is in place. I think that if we have it in place, I think we will take it from there.
Definitely in terms of data sanctity, that is an area that I would probably call out, because we are in a major rush today across the globe. When we go back to organizations and help them reimagine their AI framework, they already have something in place. The data is not in place, all right? So it's important for the data sanctity to start off with. I go back to this entire hierarchy that we're talking about and the linkage between L&D strategy, the HR strategy, the business strategy, the organization strategy. I'm going to put 2 more above that, okay? That is about sustainability. How are we aligning with the sustainability? We're talking about SDG 2030. There are certain things that are very close to what we are doing, what we can do as organizations, the way in which we're using data. So in terms of sustainability, I believe that there is a lot that we can do. The other angle is about community, right? From my organization, I know that we have something called Springboard that we have taken to a lot of rural sectors because it's about not leaving behind anyone, right? We're talking about inclusivity. Inclusivity about in data and digital inclusivity should bring in people from all sectors, all backgrounds. Yes, there are a whole lot of other things that need to be taken care of, which is infrastructure, accessibility, and all of it. But digital inclusivity needs to really mean everyone is included across strata. And I'm sure, because we've seen the power of the digitization that when we have taken it to the rural sector. We've had small little girls in government colleges putting together QR codes to sell some of the vegetables that were there in that village.
Wonderful.
So it's like amazing what we can do with data and with digital technology and digital inclusion. And those are some of the thoughts that I want to leave behind with you.
Wow, wonderful. Thank you very much, everybody.